If you're building a PC today, you've probably seen two different types of RAM, DDR4 and DDR5. But which one is actually better, and how much RAM do you really need? DDR stands for double data rate, and each new generation improves how much data the memory can move. DDR4 has been the standard for many years, and typically runs at speeds around 3200 to 3600 MHz. DDR5 is the newer generation, and usually starts around 5200 MHz and can go even higher. Because of these higher speeds, DDR5 has much greater memory bandwidth. For example, DDR4 3200 can deliver roughly 25 GB per second of bandwidth, while DDR5 5600 can deliver around 44 GB per second. On paper, that makes DDR5 look significantly faster, but real-world performance differences depend on the workload. Looking at gaming benchmarks from sources like TechSpot and Tom's Hardware, the performance gap between DDR4 and DDR5 is usually noticeable but not dramatic. In A Plague Tale: Requiem, systems using DDR4 averaged around 140 frames per second, while DDR5 averaged about 150 FPS, which is roughly a 7% improvement. In Star Wars Jedi Survivor, DDR4 averaged around 110 FPS compared to about 122 FPS on DDR5, which is closer to an 11% increase. In Shadow of the Tomb Raider, DDR4 produced roughly 198 FPS, while DDR5 reached about 214 FPS, an improvement of about 8%. When reviewers averaged many games together, DDR5 typically ended up about 5 to 12% faster in gaming performance. However, most of these gains occur in CPU-limited situations, usually when playing at 1080p. At higher resolutions like 1440p or 4K, the graphics card becomes the main bottleneck, and the difference between DDR4 and DDR5 often becomes very small. DDR5 tends to show larger improvements in productivity workloads. Tasks like video editing, large file compression, heavy multitasking, and data-intensive applications benefit from the increased bandwidth. Benchmarks from sites such as Puget Systems and Tom's Hardware show DDR5 providing around a 10% improvement in video rendering tasks and up to 15% faster performance in compression workloads. Multitasking scenarios can also see roughly a 10% advantage with DDR5. One interesting detail is that DDR5 often has slightly higher latency than DDR4, meaning DDR4 can respond to requests a bit faster, even though DDR5 moves more data overall. This is one reason the gaming performance difference is often smaller than expected. Another important factor is how much RAM you actually need. For most gamers today, 16 GB of RAM is still the sweet spot and is more than enough for modern games and general multitasking. However, 32 GB is becoming more common for people who stream, edit videos, or run many applications at once, and it also helps future-proof a system as newer games become more demanding. Capacities like 64 GB or more are usually only necessary for professional workloads such as heavy video production, 3D rendering, or workstation use. In the end, DDR4 remains a great option for budget or mid-range PC builds because it is cheaper and still performs very well. DDR5, however, is becoming the new standard and offers better long-term potential, especially as newer platforms and software begin to take greater advantage of its higher bandwidth.